Can you hear me okay? Great. Good morning. Told my wife I was coming to talk to a bunch of people that plan weddings and help the wedding industry, and she laughed. Because I know nothing about what you guys do. The first wedding I ever went to was my own, 30 years ago. But I have a lot of respect for what you do. And where we do share commonality, I do know a little bit about it. We're all entrepreneurs. And I love entrepreneurs. I don't do this. I don't do these talk kind of things. In a moment of weakness, I said I do this. You asked how many times a year do I do this? Exactly once. But my weakness is entrepreneurs. I'll do anything to help an entrepreneur. Because I've been one. So I'm going to ask a little question to start. What do you think the most important skill is for an entrepreneur? Any thoughts? Passion. Great one. Bravery. Persistence. Personal favorite of mine. Absolutely. Anybody that wants to run a business has to embody all of those things. And you need these things to run any business, right? You need to drive, you need to inspire everybody. You need to differentiate yourself, you need to make good decisions, you need to manage. You need all these things that a lot of you are sort of passionate people, someone said. You might hate this crap, but you have to do it to be successful. But I submit to you today that the single most important thing to being a great entrepreneur, not just an entrepreneur, but a great one, is creativity. That's the secret. And I've got a hunch that all of you are creative. Maybe more creative than you even realize. Because if you develop your creativity and apply it to every aspect of running a business, even the ones that you hate, because we all hate parts of what we have to do when we're entrepreneurs, right? Yeah, a lot of head nods. I'll tell you what, I had a bunch I've hated. But you have to do all these things. And if you approach them creatively, and if you approach them with a different perspective, one that's right for you, then you can do it well. So, how do you develop your creativity? How do you use it as an advantage? That's what I want to talk about today. So, that little video said we use in pitches. That's kind of an introduction to who we are. We started 21 years ago. We have about 130 people in this beautiful, renovated library up on Congress Street. And when I started the agency, my background was perfect for it. I had a degree in mechanical engineering. I had worked in a multinational engineering company, and I'd never stepped foot in an ad agency. And I had 3 kids, big mortgage, and luckily a supportive wife. I quit my job and I started VIA. So I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur when you have nothing. I had $3,000, some old computer equipment, and not a clue. But I had a lot of those things you talked about, persistence and passion. But what I really didn't realize I had, kind of in spades, was creativity. I didn't really know that then. I loved creativity. I surrounded myself with creative people. But when I look back, that's what got me through the hard times. You know, I started in '93. I knew a little about computers. I was actually a computer engineer. That's how I was trained. And this thing called the internet was coming along. And so our company went from nothing to 125 people in 2000. I had offices in San Francisco, New York, Zurich, on Inc. 500 twice. And then the internet bubble went pop, and I went boo, down to about 60 people really quickly, really hard. I had partners I had to deal with, and as I've talked to someone earlier, really challenging. And then our office in New York was in Lower Manhattan. 9/11 happened, and that was another hit. So I was this close to going out of business, that close. But I used creativity to find a better way, a different way. And now we're even bigger than we were, certainly more profitable, have an international reputation, and we're on path to being, we want to be the best agency in the world. Not the biggest, but the best. Is that a fool's errand? Maybe. But hey, an engineer started an ad agency, what the hell, you got to dream big. And all of you have to have your own sort of visions. Now, I'm not going to talk much about VIA. You're going to get a little snippet of it. But I've recently come back from a sabbatical a few weeks ago. So that's perhaps the most wonderful thing I've been able to accomplish. Created a sabbatical program at the agency. So if you have 10 years service, you get to take 6 weeks off, and we give you $2,500. And it's based on seniority, and lo and behold, I was the longest term employee. So I got to go first. And there are about 5 of us that are sort of gone now, and it was pretty amazing. And what I chose to look at and delve into more deeply was my own creativity. And so I'm going to share with you some of my own personal creative exploration, because I actually, believe it or not, I learned a lot of lessons that do apply to entrepreneurship as well. And I'm going to show you, as kind of uncomfortable as it can make one, I'm going to show you some of my artwork. So I want to talk about those things I listed that's required to run a business. I want to start with drive, persistence, whatever you want to call it. But part of this, there's 2 pieces of this I want to talk to. When you think about drive, you're going to have some tough days. It's always going to be competitive. The only person that motivates you is the schmuck looking at you in the mirror. So you have to find your drive. But I think you have to be kind of honest with yourself. And the thing that I've learned is that you have to make sure you're doing something that you really enjoy and that you have an aptitude for. And secondly, you have to find people that are the same way. They have to have an aptitude for what you're asking them to do, and they have to really love it. Because when you do that, it's kind of an unfair advantage. And I'll give you the example. So I got out of engineering school, and I was a B+ engineer. I was an okay engineer. But for me, doing engineering work was like swimming in a pool of pudding. Right? I could do it, but it was freaking hard. Vibrations analysis, hard. You know? I took the secret is I did really well academically because I took all art and all music classes in my electives. I got A's in those. I got C's on a good day in the engineering classes. It was hard. Then I got into marketing. I did get an MBA in there, so I learned a little bit about marketing, and it was easy because I had a better aptitude for it. On a bad day, I'm a B+ marketer, and on a good day, I can be better. So it just was easy. So the drive was there. It was swimming in water. And apply that to the people that you hire and that you work with. You know, they have to love what they do. They have to find it amusing. They have to really get excited to go to a wedding another time. I know what you guys are thinking when you're at those weddings. And they have to have an aptitude for it. It's in you. For whatever reason, marketing's in me. Engineering wasn't. That's why it's easier. So now, I go on this sabbatical. We have a little place on the ocean. My wife and I take the summer off. What a gift. I get it's an unbelievable gift. I bring all of my creative stuff down there. I play a little music. I used to write a ton of poetry. But last November, I picked up painting. Never touched a paintbrush, since I was 5. This is the first painting I think I ever did at 5. My mother has it on her mantle. Fast forward 45 years, and I pick up a paintbrush last November. I don't really know why, and I painted this. And my wife ran down the beach, and then I painted another one, and as you can, I loved it. It was amusing. It was fun. This is my middle daughter, and this is my mom when she's 5. So over 5 months, I realized, okay, you got an aptitude for this. You can kind of figure this out. But I loved it. I loved it. So on my sabbatical, I got all this stuff, and I created a little studio, set out all my paints, and on the very first day, June 17th, I remember, I painted this. I painted a little landscape. It's actually a photograph I had in front of Winslow Home's studio, which is down in Prouts Neck, about half an hour from here. Spectacular spot. And I looked at it, and I said, what the hell are you doing? This is such a cliche. Reclusive person goes to the coast and paints the Maine coast. Wah, wah. So, what I said that day leads us to our next point. Each of your business has to strive to be unique and different. Now, I've worked with over 150 amazing companies. The biggest issue they struggle with is finding the courage to be different, to stand apart, to be unique. It's bloody hard. I challenge all of you to look yourself in the mirror tomorrow and say, am I distinctive enough in this crazy world that changes like mad? And I bet the answer is no. I look in my mirror every day and I say, you're not different enough. VIA needs to grow. It needs to change. I'm not saying your brand needs to change. I was talking to someone about this earlier. Your brand can be the bedrock that is consistent. But your brand should stand for evolution, creativity, new ideas, innovation, inspiration. And if your brand stands for that, people are going to expect you to change and evolve. But your brand doesn't, so you have to reinvent it. Commit to differentiation. That's so key. Now, how do you do that? Simplest way is tell your story. Because your story is unique, almost by definition. You look at the great entrepreneurs, they tell their story through the lens of their own experience. Henry Ford, the Chipotle guy. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs loved design. The one thing Apple's been great at forever is exceptional user experience and design. So he told a story and created one of the most valuable companies in the world. Think about your own story. You know, my story has the part that was an engineer doing advertising, and it puts a different lens on how we build it. You have to do that for yourself. And if you can create that differentiation, it will mean money and opportunity and distinction and new clients and ease for you. Make sure your brand is unique. Make sure it stands apart. And tell your story. So, back to my little studio. I looked at that sort of cliche landscape and said, don't do any of that. Do something that's more you. And I went on this really fun, creative explosion. And I started painting faster because I like to move fast. And I started to think about the things around me differently. So the style got much looser. I'm sorry. You're not missing that much. And then I got kind of even more playful. This is my wife jumping in the ocean. And then I started using references around me as society. This was, remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? It's a friend of mine doing the Ice Bucket Challenge. And believe it or not, this is our Senator, Angus King, kissing babies. And this is Robin Williams from a friend of mine who was very close to Robin the day after he died. And this is remembering my first kiss. So now we get even more personal. And this is another thing with my wife I'm not going to talk about. And then I started getting even more expressive and more deeper in my exploration. And then I started to actually be playful and start to sculpt with the paint. And on and on and on. And then I started weaving in light and imprints of my body. And you can like this, you can hate it, I don't really care. But you can't say it's like the landscape. It's me. This is my story. This is the exploration I was on. So it starts to be different. Do that version for yourself. So you have something that's maybe different. You have to make decisions in this business. Great entrepreneurs are really decisive because you have to be. You're the chief fire putter outer, right? You know, people come at you with every freaking question. You have to be decisive. Now, my mantra around this is your brain's a geek, your heart's a sap, trust your gut. Now, some people are lucky. They really are good at making gut decisions. They're very instinctive. They've integrated all of their intellects and intelligences, and they can make decisions from their gut. A lot of people aren't. I'm not necessarily that person. I've had to work at this. You know, I was very analytically left-brain trained, and I'm okay with left brain, so I would overanalyze everything. I can run a spreadsheet like a mother. And I am a big sap. You know, I hate to hurt people's feelings. I'll come back to that later. So at times I can be sort of sentimental or emotional about my decisions. Yet the best decisions are always the one that somehow integrate that and are from my gut. I sort of know what I need to do, and sometimes my brain and my heart dissuade me from it. Develop your ability to use your instincts and make gut decisions. Here's a simple exercise. I used to belong to this thing called YPO. It's a group of entrepreneur business owners. And they would have this thing called forum where you would get together with peers. So it's like your own private board. And what they would do is you'd bring a business challenge to it. And so if you're my board, I would explain the business challenge for you. And what is clear, became clear over years, is that the smart people on the board would keep their mouth shut. They might ask you one or two questions, but they would let the person presenting talk. And by the end of the presentation of the problem, the person had answered their own question. Because they knew what the answer was. They just couldn't get beyond their brain or their heart to get to it. And then 9 times out of 10, the people sitting with you said, duh, do what you just said. Learn to do that, you'll be a better decision maker. So I had this is probably the most interesting little art project I did this summer. Because it was one of those where I went, whoa, wow. It's sort of the affirmation that creativity and sort of the power of the total being is amazing at times. So I have a very good Italian friend. He was an exchange student. I've known him since high school. He's like a brother. He's crazy, Italian lawyer. He was over visiting, and right before he left, I said, Matteo, before you go, I just want to take 5 pictures. So turn from left to right, took 5 pictures, put it away. The next day, I got out these pictures, and I said, because I did a lot that was timed, so I painted 5 portraits in 50 minutes. So each portrait was a 10-minute exercise of a sketch. And so I painted these, and I really didn't know. I mean, painting people, any of you painting a face is about 1,000,000 times harder than painting a landscape, right? Because we know what faces are supposed to look like. Landscapes, you can mush around. That's why people paint landscapes. They don't paint as many people. So I painted these really fast. And when I was done, I just remember going, whew, thank God, that was intense. That was just amazing. But the next day I came back, and I looked at them. And this guy is, like I said, he is wonderful, but he's complicated. That's why I love him. He's Italian, so he's a total caveman. He's a total pig. You can't help it. It's genetic. And look at the first one. Now remember, I'm just like trying to get these done. But this comes out first. And then he's kind of a devil, you gotta kind of watch him. I love him for that. And he's a total imp. He is sort of a provocateur, but he is also exceptionally wise, and he's a very deeply good person. Like we all are, we have dimensions. I painted this in this order. I didn't think about it. My brain wasn't trying to capture these dimensions of him. Didn't have time to be emotional about him. I just had to create it. But my gut knew how to convey this person. The difference between this and the one on the right, all done quickly, I think shows that. So I found this a really interesting exercise and validates what I was trying to say before. Your gut knows more than anything else. So we're in business. It's all about execution. You got a date you got to hit. You've got 300 people showing up. Big wedding. What the hell are you going to do? Execution is key to any great business. So the thing that I've come to learn to love are constraints. I think constraints are great for creativity. That's why many people write poetry against verse structures, because those constraints actually create opportunities to see things differently. In business, I think you have to be good at designing process. So if you're putting on a big event, you really need to be extraordinarily organized. You have to have good methodology, good process, good quality control, good checks and balances if you're going to be able to nail it. At my wedding 10,000 years ago, I had an old school photographer who made us do all these fake, stupid poses, and he had a process that was completely a bummer because it totally ruined. That's too strong. But we look back and say, God, you just screwed up our chance to have this moment. So the process was not constructive. It was constraining. It wasn't constructive. And it didn't create greater creativity, it created angst. So as an entrepreneur, use your creativity to embrace structure, to embrace process and constraints, and know that they can be liberating. So if you're a photographer, for example, and you do know, you have a good process in how to make this happen, you'll create magic, but you also do it in a way that's efficient, seamless, and visible. And have you ever called Zappos? called them, talked to them on the phone. Great, great customer service 90% of the time. Have you ever called AT&T? Abysmal customer service. Both call centers, they both have process, procedures, structure. One is so constrained that it makes you want to reach to the phone and strangle the poor man or woman talking to you. And it's not their fault. It's AT&T's fault. Zappos, you want to reach through the phone and give them some tongue, because it's awesome. Just a little, just a little. So, I'm a believer in process, but make sure you design process that releases creativity. Releases creativity. So, in my little studio, I was really interested in trying to get out of my head and just be more expressive. So I created this series of paintings. I think I did 10 of these, where I created a grid, 10 by 6, so 60 squares, and I would paint one a minute for an hour. Just paint a grid, go to the next one. So after the second one, you can't think. You're just expressing. And so I did this, set up my paints, go through an hour of exploration. This is what it looked like when it was done. It was a total disaster. In doing this over and over again, I started getting much more fluid with the paintbrush and what was sort of happening. And these were really interesting exercises and expressive. But if you look at one totality, that's not necessarily terribly interesting. It's more about process. It's more about exploration. But I cut out a little square, 2 by 2 inch square, and I started looking at them individually. And I think they become much more interesting. This is a call with Zappos, not AT&T. The movement, the swirl, the delicacy in one little square that happens so quickly. The constraint I created was beautiful when you looked at it more closely. And I thought this was sort of a good illustration of what you have to do in your business. Create that beauty and that creativity in the moments, and don't get distracted by all the kind of stuff around you. Now, we all deal with growth, and ultimately this is what we get hired to do, is help companies grow, and I could, explore this endlessly. And many of you don't want to grow your business, and you should be smart about that. You should be very deliberate that I'm a huge believer in when you set your business goals, part of that strategic analysis has to be your personal goals. What kind of life do you want to live? If I'd moved to New York or San Francisco, VIA would be bigger. Absolutely sure. But my kids would have had to have been raised in a place I didn't want to raise them. I wouldn't have been close to my family. I would have probably not been as happy. So clearly, way better for me to stay in Portland, Maine and try to do it. So make sure that's part of your thing. And if you don't want to grow, that's cool. But if you want to grow, you're going to make mistakes. And people say, I've heard one person say, I don't worry about my mistakes, I forget about them and I move on. I thought, well, that's kind of provocative, but I don't agree with it. And you hear lots of people say, learn from your mistakes. I say, love your mistakes. Learn to love your mistakes. Here's what happens when you just learn from your mistakes. You screw up. I could talk all week about the major screw-ups I've had in this business. I've made some whopper mistakes. And I used to feel self-conscious about them, honestly. It made me feel bad. I screwed up. I must not be good. Blech. Bad energy. Try to learn from that. Never do that again. That's a lot of negative crap. If you just love the mistake, we're all human. We all do the best we can. And if you love your mistake, what happens is you get sort of positive energy from that. You don't beat yourself up. You don't take that precious energy that every entrepreneur tries to manage, and squander it on something you can't fix. And once you learn to love your mistakes, not only do you learn from them, you actually start to get energy from them. You start to get empathy from them. You can empathize with other people, and I think it makes you a better business person, and a better leader, and a better person to drive growth. So, my little experiment here is I talked about the constraints of a 2-minute square a minute. I said, well, what if I painted a square a second? So I made little squares on a big canvas, put my palettes out, hit the timer, and within 2 seconds, I am completely out of control. I can't do this. I have to do this for 22 minutes. I do boom, 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 and it was a disaster. This was the abomination that came of it. It was like, whoa! That didn't work as planned. That was interesting. But instead of burning it, which was my first reaction, I hung it on the wall and I lived with it for a week, and I turned to even love this. Because what I recognized is that I did lose myself in this. It became a physical exploration. It was actually very creative, but sort of in an angst-filled way. The process of expressing and doing this and what went through my head, and even in some ways, you can't really see it in light, even the sort of quality of the painting was a little bit interesting. Nah, that wasn't interesting. But the process was amazing. And I did end to love it instead of burn it. And I think that's a kind of an important lesson we can also take forward. So management, huge topic. We could talk any aspect of it. I'm going to talk about the people side of management. I'm in a people business. That's all we really have is the wonderful people that walk in our door every day. And managing people is really hard. If you're a sole proprietor, really relish the fact you don't have anybody to manage, because once you get one employee, it's like having 10. You're managing, and you have to manage well, and a lot of entrepreneurs aren't good at managing. I'm a much better sort of practitioner and strategist than I was a professional manager. So I've had to learn to do this. And I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and it's something that I work on every day, and I think it's made me a much, much better manager of people. And I just sort of simply call it, you have to learn to develop kind candor. So here's the issue. You're working with somebody, and you want them to be a performer, and they're screwing up. They're not meeting your expectation, they might not be good enough, they might not do it like you, all the reasons. You have to develop the ability to clearly articulate what your expectations are and where you think they're not meeting those expectations and how you think they can meet those expectations. And it requires candor. And sometimes it can be sort of tough. General Electric run famously most recently, the last CEO, Jack Welch, I think was brilliant at this. I knew some people there. I'd seen him a few times. Being forthright with people is a requirement. At the same time, you have to do that in a kind way. People need to know that you, their leader, their boss, has to believe in them, has to value them. You have to care about them. You have to be kind. So if you can be candid and be kind, you're going to be a great manager of people, I think. Now, I erred on the side of kind. I didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings, so I wouldn't be so forthright with them. And so they don't really know what they need to do. Not good. I've worked really hard at being really candid with people, but you've all seen just the opposite. A prick who's just mean and nasty to people and yells at somebody all the time. They think they're being candid. No, they're not. They're being destructive. You've got to have both. And the people that are great at managing people, I think, do this well. So, back to art camp. I took this photo. It's Seguin Lighthouse. It's one of the most beautiful lighthouses. Posted it on Instagram, looked at it, said, oh, I'll paint that. This was later in the summer. And I painted a kind of representational piece of it, like the landscape at the beginning. And I looked at it, and in an effort to be candid, I said, well, why do you like that? And I liked it because I thought I did a good job. It was my ego that liked it. So I took a bunch of paintings I'd done, and I started putting hashtags on them. #ego. That's why I liked it. Or this beautiful landscape of nude beach, #nofilter. Or any of you who have been in a relationship for a long time, hopefully will find the wonderful irony and joy and love in this one. So being honest with yourself is also part of this. You have to be candid with yourself and just know where you stand. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is new business, the lifeblood of any operation, often the entrepreneur's top job, certainly is mine. And this is something I actually know a lot about because I've had to. You want to run a national agency from Portland, Maine, which people talk about being off-market. Portland's an off market from the ad agency world. We had to be good at getting new clients, new opportunities. And we worked really hard at this. And as a result, we have a wonderful company. But if I look back at the thing I've done since the beginning, this is the most intangible advice I'm going to give you, but in some ways I believe it the most, is that I have always tried to help people out. In my industry, at clients, networks, without really asking for anything in return. And I really think this sort of investment in good karma is helpful. You know, I have helped people get jobs and never seen them again. That's okay, but I helped them get a job. I've had, spoken at wedding planning events. You know, what am I doing here? But I think it's just good karma. And lo and behold, I've got a lot of lucky breaks. And my mother laughed because I was baptized on St. Patrick's Day. And, you know, I think I have been very, very lucky and fortunate. But I also try to just give back as much as I can. And I think if you also do this in all of our little communities, it pays. I don't know how exactly it pays. I can't do the ROI analysis on it, but it does pay. So the last thing I did this summer is the view out my window, my little studio down in Popham, were these boats. This is one I really looked directly out at, a little ferry boat. The dock beside our house had beautiful lobster boats, and these lobster boats are all in the harbor. They were all over the place. So when I had an hour or so and wasn't doing something so sort of rigorous, I would just paint one of these little pretty boats because they were nice. So I had a stack of these building up that I'd done over the summer, and 3 or 4 weeks ago now, it was a Saturday, and I said I had an idea. So I wrapped up the stack I'd had, and I didn't sign them. They didn't have my name on it. I enlisted my oldest daughter, who was visiting from San Francisco, for a night mission. We snuck down on the dock. We got our little dinghy out. We cruised out into the harbor, and we went up to these boats, and we snuck the paintings on. And, you know, any of you have a boat? You know, you love your boat, right? So even if somebody gives you a crappy painting of your boat, you love it because it's your boat, you know? I love my boat. And so, I don't know, it just made me smile to do this. And maybe sometime when I'm out in my boat and the waves are high and my motor shits the bed, one of these lobstermen will come pick me up. I don't know. But it's just putting good karma out there. And maybe it'll come back. So you saw in the video, we have 10 principles we live by. I wrote them 21 years ago. We haven't changed a word. We totally live by those principles. And the last one is believe. And to me, it's the most important principle to live by if you're an entrepreneur. You've got to believe. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe in the people that you're working with. You've got to believe in the people that you're serving, your clients. You have to believe in them too. And if you wake up every day believing, lo and behold, things you're believing in start to come true. I don't know why that is, but it works. And you can take that on a big scale or a small scale. Just believe in what you're doing every single day, and everything's going to be just fine. So thank you very much. Honored to be here. Anybody have any questions? I don't know how much time. I maybe went a little bit longer. Yeah.
You said that you're really good at getting new business, and aside from karma, is there anything super concrete that you can say?
Yeah, a couple of things I would really say is you can't meet enough people. You're always networking. Meet people. Meet people. Someone once said this to me, which I loved early on. He said, every time you meet someone, treat them as though at some point in the future, you're going to have to ask them for their vote. Think about that for a minute. You will start treating everybody with a little bit more respect. I don't care if it's the bum on the street. You should treat them like you're going to need their vote sometime. Or a millionaire that's going to put on because they have 5 daughters, going to put on 5 huge weddings. Treat them all the same. So meeting people like crazy. Be a shameless, and I'm not good at this one, but be a shameless self-promoter. Use PR every freaking chance you can. All of you, if you're in small markets, you all have local newspapers, build a relationship with those reporters. You know, come up with an idea, start a blog if you don't have one, come up with a point of view, create visibility by being shamelessly self-promoting. You gotta do it. You've gotta do it, even if it makes you uncomfortable. And then I think the third piece of advice on new business is learn to be extremely good at targeting. Start to know where your optimal client looks like. And learn, in today's world, you can find incredible data about them. But take the archetype client that you have, the one that you made a lot of money on, you really loved working with them. It can be things like they had this personality, so I get along really well with these personalities. It can be they have a lot of disposable income. It could be they like my style. They have a sensibility like mine. It's not just demographics. It's a much richer targeting. And once you create that, we call them lookalikes in the marketing world, you start looking for audiences like that, and then you look at how theirs are connected. Those audiences are connected. And you put your effort and your marketing dollars against those targets. Fundamental, but people don't sort of do it enough. And once you do that, you find your people, they'll find you. So there's a couple things to think about. Great. All right, thank you. It was really fun.